I call to order this regular meeting of the Shoal Planning and Zoning Commission for Tuesday, January 14th, 2025. Roll call shows that all commissioners are present this evening. Next, we will have the invocation given by Commissioner Whipple, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Vice Chair Roberts. If you'd like to join us, please stand.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful to be here this night. We're so thankful for all the blessings thou hast bestowed upon us and for this great land and community in which we live. We're so thankful for thy love and support. We ask thee now at this time to be with us during this meeting, that we may be directed and guided, that we may be inspired as to making the correct decisions for our community, that we may move forward in a positive manner. We also ask thee to please bless this community with moisture, that the forest may be sustained, that we may be kept free of the dangers of fire. Now be with us this night, we pray, in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item on the agenda is new business, and item A under new business is consideration of conditional use permit 602-04-268, submitted by Linda Grice of Young Design Group on behalf of Verizon Wireless to allow for a 110-foot monopine cell tower located at 1850 South White Mountain Road, that being APN 210-32-032, and I will turn it over to Ms. Lean for the staff summary report.
Chairman and Commissioners. Linda Grice of Young Design Group on behalf of Verizon Wireless submitted a conditional use permit, CUP, to allow for a 110-foot monopine cell tower located at 1850 South White Mountain Road, that being APN 210-32-032. Currently, the site proposed is utilized by White Mountain Theater and falls under the C2 zoning general commercial. It spans approximately 94,089 square feet with dimensions of about 295 feet deep and 275 feet wide. At the rear of the property lies a steep hillside, also designated for C2, and the southern boundary abuts C2 zoning. Section 19.115.040N Visual Quarter Protection of the City Code states, except for placement on existing structures or towers, no new tower shall be permitted within 200 feet of the edge of the right-of-way for any arterial or collector roadways as identified in the City of Show Transportation Plan. Based on this requirement for setbacks, the proposed monopine will be positioned 260 feet away from the White Mountain roadway and 205 feet from Woodford Road. In addition, City Code Section 19.115.070 B5A states separation from all residentially zoned properties shall be a minimum of 100 feet or the fall zone as certified by an engineer, whichever is greater. This condition is met as the fall zone reaches 75 feet. The closest residential zoning boundary line to the proposed monopine sits approximately 150 feet away from the proposed cell tower location. The Pine Oak subdivision boundary line is approximately 375 feet from the proposed location. To comply with City Code 19.115.070 B5B, separation distances between towers, it is important to note that the nearest existing tower is located at 1350 South White Mountain Road and stands at a distance of 1,800 feet from the proposed monopine. The applicant stated that the installation of the tower is necessary at this location because of connectivity needs, equipment specifications, and to address coverage gaps. Alternative sites nearby were evaluated but deemed impractical by the applicant. City Code Section 19.15.040C1 states that towers shall be painted subject to any applicable FFA standards, a neutral color, as to reduce visual obstructiveness. At a tower site, the design of the buildings and related structures shall to the extent possible, utilize materials, colors, textures, screening, and landscaping that will blend them into the natural setting and surrounding buildings. The elevation rendering supplied by the applicant illustrates how the monopine tower relates to its environment. For context, the theater stands approximately 23 feet tall based on the latest plans available, with a base elevation of 6,390 feet. The proposed monopine will have the same base elevation. At the western property line, the elevation is measured at 6,430 feet, while the closest residential home is situated at an elevation of 6,450 feet. The monopine tower will be painted a natural pine bark color with faux branches approximately 12 to 13 feet in length, tapering up to maintain the same shape of the surrounding pines. According to the plans submitted by the applicant, there will be no lighting on the tower and compound area. Additionally, all FFA and FCC regulations will be adhered to prior to construction, thereby fulfilling the essential requirements specified in our city code under sections 19.115.040D and E. Current zoning of the surrounding properties include North, C2 General Commercial, South, C2, East, C2, West, C2 General Commercial, and R17 Single Family Residential 7,000 square feet. The current land uses of the surrounding properties include North, Speedway, South, Furniture Row, East, National Bank of Arizona, West, Commercial Residential. Transmittal memos were sent to all affected agencies. No applicable comments have been received. One phone call from a neighboring property owner has been received regarding the proposed development, indicating that they were opposed to the project. We received an additional phone call today from another adjacent property owner in opposition due to the property values and the health and safety concerns. After reviewing the standards for review, the zoning ordinance discussions with the applicant, and because of the request is consistent with the City of Show Low general plan, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve conditional use permit C602-04-262 submitted by Linda Grice of Young Design Group on behalf of Verizon Wireless to allow for a 110-foot monopine cell tower located at 1850 South White Mountain Road, that being APN 210-32-032. All development shall comply with all applicable federal, state, and local requirements, including Federal Communication Commission, the FCC, Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, and building permit requirements. The tower shall be in conformance with the submitted site plan. No further height extensions are allowed unless approved through a future conditional use permit.
Thank you. I will open it up to the commission for questions for staff at this time. Commissioner Adams.
Sort of a restatement. It seems as though this cell phone tower falls all within the city code and there's no variances needed or given for this. Is that a correct statement?
That is correct. Commission may recall a previous cell tower that we had over by Fairway Park, in which a number of allowances were requested. Allowances included reducing required distances to property lines, reducing distance to residential properties. Recent revisions to city code actually removed the option for the commission to make those allowances. So now the question just is, does it meet the hard number as specified in city code? If it doesn't, then the commission does not have any latitude to make that reduction. In this case, the application as submitted does meet all of the requirements as outlined in city code, and no changes or allowances are being requested or would be required to meet city code.
Very good, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? I do, Director Tregaskis. So in the staff summary report, it talked about the 1,800 feet from the next closest tower to comply with city code. Can you remind me, Is there like a minimum, what's the minimum separation distance?
1,500 feet.
So like and that wouldn't be able to be changed by the commission. That is set in city code, 1,500 feet.
Correct. So in order for, if somebody was to come with a request that was less than 1,500, they'd actually have to go through the variance process rather than coming to the commission and requesting an allowance.
Thank you. And just to refresh my memory, the reasoning for, or the process for the conditional use permit is it because of the height of the tower, or is it just any type of communications tower in general? They all have to go through the CUP process? I'm trying to remember, but
Right.
if you could
So-
refresh my memory.
So it's based on the height of the tower. The way our code is written, we restrict cell towers to commercial property or to industrial property. With a few exceptions, they're not allowed on residentially zoned property. You'll find most of our commercial property is going to run parallel to our major highways, Clark Road, Deuce Clubs, White Mountain Road. So the code really kind of is going to channel these types of facilities along our major thoroughfares. The code allows, if it's an antenna or a tower that is less than 50 feet in height, it becomes an administratively approved use, does not necessarily have to come to the commission. I could still kick it to you guys if I wanted to, if I didn't feel comfortable with, maybe an aspect or something of it. Once you get over that 50 feet, then it becomes a conditional use permit. This one is a total of 110 feet. That's about 105 feet to the top of the antennas. And then they've got a little bit of a fake pine tree topper kind of at the top to finish it off a little bit for a total height of 110 feet. That would be consistent with the antenna and tower that was installed most recently there kind of on Clark Road between the Dollar General and Circle K. That one is also a 110-foot monopine tower.
Great, thank you for refreshing my memory and the clarification on that. Any other questions for staff? Any questions for the applicant? I do have one question for the applicant. So you could just state your name and address for the record.
Linda Grice, 10245 East Via Linda, Suite 211, Scottsdale.
Thank you. So I was looking through some of the plans you submitted here. So it looks like the tower is going to be at the base of the hill. It's not up on the hill. It's kind of right adjacent to the parking lot behind the theater. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, that is correct. It's behind the building at the base of the hill.
Base of the hill.
Photo sim that's on the screen shows that where it's at the lowest part.
Okay. And so then it's going to be basically right in front of where the tree line starts, behind the theater, if I'm understanding that correctly. I just want to
That's correct, yes.
I just kind of want to visualize what this is going to look like. So it's not set up in those trees; it's right in front of those trees at the base of the hill.
That's correct. There's a photo sim on the screen if you can see that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
I have one.
Vice Chair Roberts.
Your company contracts with Verizon to find cell sites
That's true.
for cell towers. Not real detailed, but the general criteria for where you place a cell phone tower and how high it needs to be is based on what, like, say, 2 or 3 major factors.
So each carrier, Verizon, AT&T, has a network. So several cell phone towers. those towers have antennas that cover 65 degrees approximately, and they face 3 directions. So if you have one facing this way and one here, you have a gap in here that the antennas are not pointed at. So it becomes a process of fitting the sites so that you've got coverage. So the antennas also cover 10 degrees out. So if it's here, it may cover a long ways, but it could go right over the top once it gets too flat. So it's got to be focused down somewhat. So that kind of restricts where the sites can go. So for instance, on the screen is a coverage map of Verizon's area, right? And here is the site. The antennas are turned off here. But so what they're looking for is red is best, gold, lime, and then the mint color. So not very good coverage along 260 or the residential area to the west or where the residential area is going to the east. So this is not very good. This is what the coverage would look like if this site was the only site there. So you can see there's some red, a lot more gold, and the green's diminished. But when it's in with the network, you have a lot more gold. So that's how they work that. So the RF engineer does computer modeling to figure out the location to cover where the most hits are coming from. So the most demand, and it's all computer modeled.
Okay. So anecdotally, I'm aware of gaps when driving through that area, right by that intersection where the movie theater is. I hear it from numerous people from that point going south towards the shopping centers. There's an area there that we seem to have, more dropped calls, at least anecdotally from people that they're aware of that. They say, every time I drive through there, I drop my call. So this should help to alleviate part of that situation, correct?
Yes, it should. That's the intent, is to cover that area.
Will it also enhance our emergency services coverage at all? Or are they separate from that? Such as fire department and police department?
They're separate, but so I don't know if Sholo's emergency service is on Verizon system.
Okay.
I can't answer that offhand.
Okay. I noticed on the coverage map that you're showing here, the other place that anecdotally we're hearing where they're having a very hard, difficult time, and personally I've experienced this, is right here, right in this area right here,
Yes.
downtown Sholo. People tell me, well, when they call Verizon, Verizon tells them that the city of Sholo won't let them put up the tower. Well, my understanding is we've got a couple of locations identified where towers and receiving antennas could go. How do we go about having a meeting with you and or Verizon to try to increase this coverage? We're doing a great job of doing this right here. How can we do it right here? How can we help to get better coverage in this area here?
And if I just may interject, maybe we just want to, maybe at some point we could maybe schedule a meeting to address that, but that's not really on the agenda right now, but maybe that's something that we can address at a future time.
I just would like to put that out there. We'd like to see some better coverage down here. Okay? Nothing that doesn't, like she said, it's not on the agenda, but as long as we're talking cell phone signals, if we can maybe try to, if you're a person that helps identify those sites,
I can connect you.
that would be great. Okay, that's my comments.
Thank you, Vice Chair Roberts. Any other, Commissioner Adams?
Yeah, I would, I see a little bit of information on security fencing, and I know this is kind of a popular site for teenagers and kids, so I was hoping you'd just maybe briefly describe what that security fencing might look like, just for our purposes.
Sure. So on the screen, I have the photo sim the tower is not included inside of the equipment area. So, which is common in a lot of jurisdictions in Arizona. The reason being that where we've got the compound, the security fencing with all the equipment, it's an area that can be expanded to put a second, third, possibly fourth carrier. If that goes where the tower's sitting, which is dictated by the setbacks from the road, then about 4 to 5 parking spaces have to be taken out. So this is the compromise to be able to get the tower, keep the most parking. So the Bow tree typically has branches that start at 15 feet. We've increased that up to 20. So no branches to 20 feet. The branches are soft composite so that they move. So grabbing onto a branch and pulling yourself up, very difficult because the branch moves. The attachment point is a little nub. So the branches will pull off with significant weight. And the little nubs are less than 2 inches, so that would be very hard to climb. Plus, the branches are put on very densely, so you can't like wiggle your way up. So those security measures on the tree itself are sufficient in most jurisdictions to not require anything additional. The fencing around the compound is, well, even if people climb over the fence, that happens even on an 8-foot tall fence. There's really nothing in there that they can do because all the cabinets are locked.
Okay.
So they're just inside of a fenced area.
So the tower itself is exposed and not within the fence. Is that kind of in summary? Are we concerned about people driving through the parking lot and hitting that?
It's got some bollards in front of it. So the tree, the tower, wouldn't likely do anything by being hit. A lot of jurisdictions don't require bollards. In this case, we've got bollards around the tree to prevent any kind of damage to it.
All right, I think that's the questions I have for you on that.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Adams. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much. I'll now open it up. If there's any members of the public that would wish to speak on this item, you can do so at this time. Just come forward, make sure you state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Many of you I know. My name is Keith Johnson. My address is 1130 East Pine Oaks Drive, right behind this Pine Oaks subdivision. I'm the town manager for Pine Top Lakeside, so I'll lay my cards on the table. I can't believe I'm a NIMBY tonight. My gosh, I managed oil field service companies, and I've heard all sorts of arguments. I've been down the road with cell towers, and not that I'm not sympathetic, but I've always believed in good siting is important. It's a successful thing. I've worked with Verizon. I don't think I've worked with Linda. She'll probably come to me at some point for an application, or conditional use permit. All right, so my opposition to this location is my house is at 6,490 feet. This top of this tower is going to be at 6,500. I'm only a few hundred feet away, right in the line of sight. I'll say that, and I'll save this for the end. Looking at the FCC's document, Human Exposure to Radio Frequency Fields Guidelines for Cellular Antenna Sites, it says a lot. Consequently, normal ground level exposure, ground level, that would be at 6,390 feet. is much less than the exposure that might be encountered if one were very close to the antenna and in its main transmitted beam. So, they can put these on a building, then they limit the access to the antenna by employees or people that may access the antenna or the rooftop, because there is a hazard to being close to the antenna. I don't know how much hazard there is a few hundred feet away, but for me, it's like looking down a gun barrel, because it's just right outside my window. And for several of the houses, and you have it on your maps, I think one of the houses is 150 feet away, another is 200 or 250 feet away. Pine Oaks property boundary is 375 feet. There's 3 homes right there, and they're a little bit lower than me. They're about 30 or 40 feet lower, but they're close to that that altitude. Now, will there be Verizon will build, go on there obviously, but then you'll have AT&T. You're going to have FirstNet. You're going to have you could have T-Mobile. You're going to have 2 or 3 on there. So looking at these guidelines, it goes on. Calculations corresponding to a worst-case situation, all transmitters operating simultaneously and continuously at the maximum licensed power show that, in order to be exposed to RF levels near the FCC's guidelines, an individual essentially have to remain in the main transmitting beam for several minutes or longer. So, again, it doesn't quantify what that distance is, but my phone goes to my hearing aids. Hopefully you didn't hear it ring. Thought I have it on silent. Anyways, so I think you have a pole that's 1,800 feet away. I'm not sure why they can't go on that pole. We had a cell tower applicant come to the town last year, and they provide the analysis. The boilerplate, every application says this, and I've been involved in government for 26 years. Sorry. The applicant stated that the installation of the tower is necessary at this location because of connectivity needs, equipment specifications, and to address coverage gaps. Alternative sites nearby were evaluated but deemed impractical by the applicant. That's boilerplate time. I've seen it numerous times. What we found on our last applicant, we took their analysis, we sent it to another company, we had it analyzed, and it wasn't true. Now, that was a company that was going to build the tower for another carrier, not Verizon. And we suggested, why don't you go over to the tower that's behind Realty Executives up there by Charlie Clark's. And that's a very tall tower. And they said it won't work. Well, T-Mobile's on there now. And that was the company that they were going to build that for, because it did work. So analysis is subjective, kind of like going to the dentist. It's not an exact science. There are other sites that will work. And the county recently voted down a cell tower out by on the east of Snowflake. They had a lot of people that came and opposed it. For me, I think there's a better site. I don't mind being 600 feet away if I was at 6,390 feet at the base, but not at eye level within a few hundred feet. And so I don't know what the danger is, but I'm 600 feet away. Some of these houses are only are almost half that distance or even closer. So I know in the guidelines it says, and the attorney will tell you, you can't turn this down, but you can. And it would take, I don't know, they're not going to sue you because they got to come back at some point and ask for another application. All the ins and outs. We lucked out on our last one. They timed out on their thing got tabled. They didn't come back. So we lucked out, and that tower went away. But there are other avenues, and you don't have to accept that what they've given you is exact, that this is the only site that will work for. Yeah. Any questions?
Thank you.
Don't envy your... I've been I've been an elected official also, so I know the pressure.
Thank you, sir. Any other members of the public? Come on up.
I didn't know how many there was going to be, so I made 3.
Handing out.
And I know you.
How are you guys?
All right, so my name is Elise Kempton. My address is 1291 East Wolford Road. I am almost directly behind this tower. I think on the map, it shows my neighbor, Lorraine Harmon, as a tiny bit closer, but looking at the picture that was up, I think I might actually be a little bit closer. My kids do kind of play down on this hill, and so that even kind of makes it a little more challenging for me. So some of the things I have in here have been addressed already, or questions I had been answered, so they're a little bit wrong, but I'm just going to go ahead and read through it. So it says, Dear City of Shiloh Planning and Zoning Commission and Justin Trigeskis, because I spoke with him earlier today, I'm writing to formally express my opposition to the placement of the cell tower near my home located at 1291 East Wolford Road. I believe this proposal is not in alignment with the best interests of the community and violates several provisions in our city's municipal code, particularly those related to zoning, public safety, aesthetics, and health concerns. 1, the zoning and land use restrictions. As per Chapter 19.115.070, the proposed placement of the cell tower does not comply with the designated zoning regulations for this area. The proposed site is located too close to a residential zone, and the municipal code emphasizes the protection of residential character and the need to minimize disruptive land uses. Allowing the tower to be constructed in the area would set a dangerous precedent for future residential encroachment by industrial or commercial structures. The 2, aesthetic and environmental impact. The city's code, under the same code, outlines the need for structures such as cell towers to be visually compatible with their surroundings. The proposed tower will significantly disrupt the aesthetic value of the neighborhood, potentially lowering property values and quality of life for residents. The fall zone of the tower should be at least 121 feet from our property lines. Obviously, that has been checked, and my numbers were a little different than what you had said. And I wasn't sure of the distance between the movie theater and the road. Looking at that picture, it still seems like it is close to the movie theater. You know, if it were to fail and fall, I feel like it could pose a great hazard in that instance. And besides being an eyesore itself, I feel like the fencing is also an eyesore. 6-foot security fence. It's supposed to have an anti-climbing devices there. You know, that's seen from the road driving up. That is seen from my property, like not necessarily my home, but my property that we use thoroughly. According to the same code, there has to be 4 foot of landscaping around the compound to effectively screen it from homeowners. I don't know how that's going to be done with it at this level, and we're at this level. And it's also all on asphalt, so I'm not sure how landscaping will go in there. Also in my research, I read that the cell tower's lifespans are anywhere from about 10 to 30 years. 30 seems kind of far, 10 doesn't seem that far off. What is the plan at that point? It does fail. Is it removed? Is it left there to rot and depreciate property values? Moreover, it is important to consider the potential environmental impact of constructing such a large structure near residential homes, including potential hazards to wildlife and increased traffic congestion during the construction. Next, the Public health and safety. The municipal code under 7.20.020 requires that any facility, including cell towers, prioritize the safety and well-being of the public. I am deeply concerned about the potential health risk associated with increased exposure to the electromagnetic fields, that is the EMFs from the tower. While the FCC has guidelines, I urge the city to carefully review scientific studies on the long-term health impacts of living in proximity to such infrastructure. According to RadioSmart, the distance needed to reduce exposure down to the public, a precautionary level of 100 microwatts per meter squared is often around a quarter mile or 1,320 feet. The radiation put off by the towers is greatest within 164 feet, which is too close to our property lines. It is not until the 150 meter mark, which is just under 500 feet, that the energy gets weaker. I think my house directly is like 349 feet or something like that from this tower. The safety of the residents should take precedence over the convenience of cell tower installation. According to the National Library of Medicine, which is an official website of the United States government, prolonged exposures to EMFs can damage cells and be linked to an increased diagnosis of brain tumors, breast cancer, leukemias, and other cancers. The elderly and children seem to have a higher risk due to the still developing tissues of the children and the weakened immune systems. My neighbors, who I also have a letter from her, she could not be here today. She's 95 years old, and I think her cousin and her niece lives with her, and they are roughly 70 and 75. So I also have 3 children, and I know there's children in the other homes in Pine Oaks that line the outside there. So number 4, the lack of proper communication. According to section 19.135.030, it appears that there has not been adequate community engagement or consultation regarding the project. The residents of this area have not been sufficiently informed about the proposed plans or given an opportunity to voice concerns in a meaningful way. The notice shall describe the type and nature of the request at least 15 days prior to the date of the scheduled hearing. The lack of transparency is inconsistent with the city's commitment to involving residents in decisions that directly impact their quality of life. So, in light of the aforementioned concerns, I strongly urge the city and the Planning Commission to reject the proposal for the cell tower near my home. The placement of such a structure in a residential area is not in alignment with the values expressed in our municipal code, and it poses a range of risks to public health, safety, and the environment. Thank you. So this is just from my neighbor. I wanted to read it so that you guys can hear her concerns. So her name's Lorraine Harmon. She just kind of gave me the proxy to speak for her, but she is opposed to the tower as well. Her property, I think according to the map, is the closest to this, to the tower. She's concerned about the health risks as well, and about it just being an eyesore. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Kempton.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Zach Jackson. I live at 1010 East Pine Oaks Drive. Like the last 2 speakers, I share a lot of the same concerns about living in the sort of main transmission beam of the top of the tower. I'm a little bit further west from Keith's house. I'm not sure the distance from my home to the tower, but the elevation of my house is probably something about 10 feet higher than Keith's. I have 2 little girls, and I haven't. I've spent some time this afternoon after I heard about this meeting and this topic, looking at the American Cancer Society and FCC published information about risks associated with cell towers, and it seems like there's a lot of uncertainty and there's not a lot of detail about where exactly the distance from cell towers where the risk of overexposure occurs. But I'm certainly concerned about the information that was provided on those Cancer Society and FCC websites. Beyond that, I wanted to share that while it's true, I do have Verizon. I have since I've lived in the community for 8 years now. 3 and more years ago, it was true that we dropped calls going into our neighborhood. There was a dead zone there, but that has not been true for the last couple of years. Haven't had that experience, and I've no longer, for whatever reason, had difficulty with cell reception at my house. So I'm not sure that that's still a viable justification for the site location. I'm certainly personally interested in what other alternatives were considered. I don't know if you guys have that information available to you and it just wasn't a part of the agenda packet or what, but I would encourage you to scrutinize, I guess, the alternative site evaluation if there was any provided to you. And I think that's it. I'd just like to support the concerns that were already raised and add that little bit of other info. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else from the public? All right, with that, I'll close the public comment portion and bring it back to the commission for further discussion. I don't know, Director, if you had anything you wanted to highlight in response to what was stated by the public, and Linda, I can give you a chance to to speak to some of those concerns as well.
Yes, Chair, appreciate that. So we've got the overhead aerial on the TV screens in front of the commission, also available there on the screens internally and being broadcast. The property that's under consideration is the theater property. It's outlined in red. The approximate location is marked there with kind of that red star on the edge. You can see kind of along the lines of the chair's question earlier, it does not go into the treat area. It is there at the base of the slope. As far as separation distances to adjacent homes, measurements taken just off of our aerial photos, so understand there's a little bit of a plus or minus on there, but fairly close to the first home to the west. That was the property owner that was referenced this evening that is not in attendance, but you have a letter from her. I did speak with her on the phone regarding this application and her concerns, which were included in the staff report. Her home is approximately 300 feet from the cell tower proposed location. The home of Ms. Kempton, who we did hear from this evening, kind of there in the bottom corner. That home, again, measures out at about 450 feet away. And that's just a direct line measurement from the proposed site to the home. There's a little, I'm sure there's some variation there if we went out with actual survey equipment. It's not going to come out to 450, but it'll be fairly close. The distance from the tower directly south to the Pine Oaks boundary, that comes out at just right about 375 feet. As far as separation distances, there was a question about that. City code requires that the tower be, and I want to read this so that I get it specific. I've got a lot of things open here. So under city code, setbacks, the following setback requirements shall apply to all towers. Towers must be set back a distance equal to at least 125% of the fall zone as certified by a licensed engineer from any adjoining lot line. In this case, the fall zone is certified by the engineer with 65 feet, which gives us, when you add to the 125%, That's about 81 feet is what they need to be to the property line. They're actually about 116 feet or so, so they exceed the minimum required fall zone as certified by an engineer. A little bit about landscaping was brought up. The plans that were given to us this evening, those are just conceptual plans. They're not construction drawings. If they are submitted for actual permit, again, assuming that this was approved by the commission, they would need to show that landscaping around that equipment enclosure area, that 4 feet wide that was discussed or mentioned previously. So that is a requirement of city code and is something that we would be looking at on actual construction drawings. There was a question about notice requirements and a specific code section that was referenced. That code section deals specifically with variances. So earlier in the discussion, we talked about if they were to come in and say, we need a special exception from the code, it would actually go through the variance process, which goes to the Board of Adjustment. It's a completely different process than what we're having this evening. In that case, yeah, we would require a minimum of a 15-day notice. In this case, because this is a conditional use permit, we require a minimum of 10-day notice. As far as we have to post the property and we have to send out letters to all property owners within 300 feet at least 10 days prior. That was done. Incidentally, our sign that we posted there on the movie theater property apparently got pushed over. Looks like there were some tire tracks there. We actually went back and reset the sign because we felt that notice is important. So we do comply with the requirements as far as notice. Mr. Chair, as far as, health concerns and things like that, I would defer the rest of those types of questions to the applicant. Also questions as far as, why this site and maybe not another site, I'd defer that to the applicant as well.
Yeah, thank you, Director Tragaskis, for the clarification on that. Any comments from the commission, Commissioner Adams?
Yeah, I was hoping, I'm a little confused about not having the security fence around the tower itself. I'm wondering if we've had that in the past, if we have other towers that are set up similar, and then how the city code kind of falls in line there. I don't know that I've seen that in my brief stint here, so I was hoping you could maybe speak to that a little bit, Mr. Tragaskis.
So typically you'll see a fence around it. For whatever reason, most companies will go ahead and put a fence around the base. In this case, they are electing not to, or at least requesting not to. As I said earlier, there were some changes in the code that took away some options by the commission. Fall zone, setback distances, those types of things. In this case, fencing around the tower can be required by the commission, or you guys can waive that requirement. Staff's perspective, it really doesn't make a difference to us whether you put a fence around the base of it or not. It really, once you're starting to put in the bollards around the base, that protected area with the bollards versus putting a fence around the same area really won't impact the parking or anything like that. So in this case, yes, it could be required if the commission felt that it was necessary.
Do we have other towers in city limits that are set up similar to that, or is this the first one?
Most towers that I'm aware of do have the fence around the base. I know there are probably at least one what we would consider a standard cell tower that may not have a fence around it. That would be the one at Cell 1, directly north, 1,800 feet north of this. We also have what we call a micro cell site that is out on Penrod Road, kind of over by Cooley. They're close to the county building on Penrod. That is where they take an existing utility pole and they put a small antenna on the top of it. There's no fence around the base of that. It's just a standard electric pole with an antenna on the top of it. So.
Okay.
Vice Chair Roberts.
What I'm hearing is that possibly this site, because it's a movie theater and attracts a lot of teenagers, might be more susceptible to antenna access than maybe another site. My question for the applicant would be, would it be possible for us to have, I know they're already planning on putting in the bollards, and that would keep it protected from vehicles. If we put, in addition to that, another fence around it, would that add additional deterrent and security to the tower and try to deter a little bit from, granted, teenagers can climb a however many feet fence. Would it be an effective deterrent? I guess I'm asking the commission and the applicant if they thought that having that additional fence there would add to the security of the tower.
In my opinion, a fence around the tower puts it closer to the branches, where if you're wanting to try to climb the tower, you're up on the fence, you're already 6 to 8 feet up to try to get onto the tower. So I think it is not a deterrent to somebody that wants to climb it. If they wanted to climb it, the tower, it'd be easy over the fence, up the tower. That would just be what they would do. So a fence around it, I don't believe is a deterrent. If I may, this is a photo of a site in Peoria. It's at a church, at a playground. It's not fenced. The playground is open to the tower. There's no issues of anyone climbing the fence there. That type of tower, it becomes more common, especially if you have like a building where you've got your equipment inside, the tower outside. The tower rarely gets fenced. So it's more common than you actually realize. So.
I have a question. What about on the cliff side? So when you look at the picture on page 28, your proposed where the tower's going to sit. Back side of that, it kind of has a bit of a steep slope, almost a cliff.
Yes.
If kids were climbing up on top of that, could they reach out and somehow grab a branch or get to the tower that way? Is it that close?
I mean, I think probably you could jump, like if you were really.
That's what I'm concerned
Okay,
about.
so when I say jump, like you could.
Get a running start?
Get a running start down the hill and maybe jump. But it's like, if you're gonna do that, why wouldn't you just walk over there and try climbing?
Right.
I mean, I don't think that it's not as close to the slope as you think.
Okay.
I mean, it would be a difficult jump.
Okay. Yeah, there's a concern there, I guess, one thought I had.
One more quick question, if I could.
Yes.
The equipment that's down at the bottom, down at the lowest level of all of this, parking lot level, we're going to put landscaping and items to camouflage that a bit. Will, from looking up above, from the houses that are up above, that are 375 feet or 400 feet away, however, 450 feet, how much vision would you see that they would have of that actual equipment area down there? And with the trees and everything there, will that block most of the vision from the houses that are up on the hill?
I believe that you would have to be on the parcel that the theater's on to be able to see down the slope to where that is. So I don't believe you can see it at all.
Commissioner Hatch.
Linda, so as I listen to the public here, the main concern is property value, but more the underlying tone is health. So you've obviously leased, set up, administered hundreds of these sites. You've heard the argument from the FCC, Cancer Institute, on and on and on. Speak to that on these radiuses that we're talking about, the 5G waves, whatever, that causes me cancer, right? To either bolster me up to make it feel good or settle me down and make me feel good.
Okay, so first, on the record, the Spectrum Act prohibits a jurisdiction from considering health effects in their decision. And so, that said, health effects. The way that the cell phone works is it is a transmitter. I'm the cell phone tower. I transmit. You have a cell phone. It has an antenna.
Yeah, so real quick, just so I can put it in layman's terms, what's the difference when I stick this to my ear and when you're banging me from your tower? And I'm just out in my yard over here enjoying my kids.
The power at your cell phone is over 1,000 times more than what I'm transmitting at the tower.
At 350 feet or 100 feet or
Any distance.
so it's what you just said, this is more dangerous than your tower.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's provable?
Yes, absolutely. I'm not an RF engineer, but I can bring one. I can do some documents that show that. Yes.
Are we finished, Commissioner Hatch?
I'm done.
Commissioner Wilson?
Sorry, I'm losing my voice. So, one of the gentlemen who spoke earlier mentioned that the calls, and I know this too, haven't dropped for years, it seems like, when you go past the Pines condos and stuff. I haven't dropped a call in a long time. Why choose this site? Were there other sites that you looked at, and how did you land on this one?
I will address that. Let me get to 1800. Okay. I'll use this map to talk about the sites. So here's this Cellular One, right? So we looked at that site. We met with Cellular One, tried to see how we could get on it. The way that they were forced into going up against the building doesn't allow for equipment to go anywhere. There was no way that Cellular One and Verizon's construction engineer could figure out a way to get the electrical, the trenching, everything done for Verizon to get into the site. And the height of the antennas was going to be at 45 feet. That would only cover the Meadows area. It wouldn't cover out to the residential going up on the hills on both sides. So it was not constructible, and it didn't provide coverage that was that beneficial. I mean, there would still have to be maybe 2 more cell sites to cover the same area. So that was why that was dropped, that site. Going down 260, moving south, there's, on the west side, is commercial properties, right? Those commercial properties are maybe 150 to about 200 feet in depth. A little over there's one piece where the Imperium is. That's a little over 200 feet. So the setback from the road, there's not enough distance for the setback to meet any of the requirement there, and that's a non-negotiable at the city. So at the Emporium, the only place it could fit was in the parking lot at the front door of some of the businesses. It's like, that just is not something that I would consider if I was the business owner. So I didn't even ask them, because that was the only place it could go. Okay, so that takes care of the western side all the way down to Wolford Road. That's this entire site here. Okay. Going along the eastern side of the road, you have the meadows, and most of that's in a floodplain. So Verizon won't put a tower in a floodplain because you just have that instability. So that's the bulk of the eastern side down to Wolford. Then you have those couple of pieces that now have hotels on them. The hotel closest to the road, the lot is not wide enough to meet the 200-foot setback. The property that is now the Hampton Inn, the second one in, that site could meet the setback. The tower would have to be close to the front door or on the back corner. We did talk to the property owner about doing that. He was willing, not in the front door, but maybe on the back, because of the elevation change from the creek where that sets up to the road. The tower would need to be about another 30 to 40 feet, over 100, so about 140 feet tall, to be able to meet the ridge lines, to go over the ridge lines. So, and it would be built as, it'd have to be like a standalone bell tower. So you would just have, coming down 260, you look into the distance, the hotel, and 140-foot tower and to be that tall, you'd need to be about 25 by 25. So it was unsightly, but it could be done. It'd be also very expensive. So cost and the blocking, like the nice visibility going down 260. It's a nice view, right? So then there's a bank, and the only place that the bank was in a drainage area, in a retention basin. That wasn't feasible. And then you get down further, you've got the sides that go up the hill in the trees. It would have taken out, we'd have to put a road in and take out a lot of trees to get a 40 by 40 space. So this was like the best alternative out there.
Thank you.
So one other thing about the health issues, the FCC requires that the carriers provide their radiation or radiating estimates out. So if they find, there's something in the area that's close, they have to turn the power back so that they control that to keep it within the limits. And so it's monitored and well known what those are.
So just to kind of drill down on it a little more in clarity, this is worse for me than your tower.
Yes, sir.
Doesn't matter the load running through. So if I'm running down 260 and it's a holiday weekend and that thing's just lit up like a Christmas tree, there's no more bad energy coming out of it, for lack of a better term, than what's stuck to my ear, correct?
I believe that's the case, exactly what you said, yes.
So then why is it then that we have this consternation then with the public that it's bad? And how come your industry sells, right, hasn't come with more educated conversation like, no, this is worse for you than the tower that you're proposing? Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of a vague question.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to really take a wild guess to answer the question, why.
Okay.
Any other questions for Linda while she's up here? Thank you. Any other, so I'll bring it back to further discussion or a motion by the commission? Yes, sir. Yeah, feel free.
Keith Johnson, 30 Pine Oaks. I'll read this again from the FCC, citing, calculations according to a worst-case situation, all transmitters operating simultaneously and continuously at the maximum licensed power show that in order to be exposed to RF levels near the FCC's guidelines, that's the agency, an individual would essentially have to remain in the main transmitting beam for several minutes or longer. You're on your cell phone all day long. I think they're saying here that being in the way of close to an antenna is going to be worse than your cell phone. American Cancer Society said, on a roof with a cellular antenna, which I'm assuming will be similar to what they may mount here, exposure levels approaching or exceeding the FCC safety guidelines are only likely to be found close to and directly in front of the antennas. If this is the case, access to these areas should be limited. If an antenna is up on a building top, access to that area has to be limited. So all I can say is there must be a hazard to being too.
Does it give a
It didn't.
foot, like feet? So are we talking me to you, or are we talking 400 feet away?
It doesn't say. And I said that before. I can't quantify what that distance is.
Well, that's my question.
Right.
Right.
Well, I can't say what it is. I can't answer your question on that.
This I know is to my ear.
Right. But the FCC and the American Cancer Society is saying that close proximity to an antenna should be limited. They don't tell us to limit our cell phone use. Although I use my speaker rather than put it to my ear all the time.
I use earbuds all the time.
So that's all I can say. And I realize that the FCC guidelines say that you can't consider health issues. I say that my suggestion is that this is not a good site because of the level of our homes being in direct line with the antennas from these. Will there be a future? Will there be a second or a third one go on there? It increases the RF that will come from that tower that could possibly affect people. So that's the only concern. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion amongst the commission?
Well, I just want to say that, again, I haven't dropped a call in a long time, and it's like, I haven't seen any data that says why this particular one is needed here in this area. But I do believe that obviously we have downfalls in Show Low in our area for cell phone service. And I know that our towers are most likely overworked, some of them, especially when the tourists are up here. But that's just my comment to it.
Any other comments or a motion?
I move to approve CUP 60204-268 submitted by Linda Grice of Young Design Group on behalf of Verizon Wireless to allow for 110-foot monopine cell tower located at 1850 South White Mountain Road, that being APN 21032-032, subject to staff recommendations.
I have a motion by Commissioner Hatch. I have a second by Vice Chair Roberts. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And that, no nays. Is that correct? That passes unanimously. Director Dragaskas.
Thank you, Chair. This conditional use permit will be considered effective unless an appeal is received by the city clerk's office within 7 days. If no appeal is received, then this will become effective.
Thank you, Director. Moving on to item 6 on the agenda, call to the public. If there's anyone wishing to speak on a matter within the jurisdiction of the Planning and Zoning Commission not on the agenda this evening, you may do so at this time. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 7, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion on the approval of the minutes from the Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting of October 22nd, 2024?
I move to approve the minutes.
I have a motion by Vice Chair Roberts. Do I have a second? I have a second by Commissioner Wilson. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. That passes unanimously. Moving on to item 8, summary of current events, and we will begin with Commissioner Hatch.
Great Dan Shello.
I don't have any.
I don't have anything.
Right now.
Just those around, just be careful out in the woods. It's extremely dry. We're hoping for rain, but I'm not sure we're going to get it. So let's just be careful, especially as spring comes in.
I'd like to echo those statements by Councilman Adams and add to them. We would like to encourage everybody to be prepared for the possibility of having to evacuate. Because we've seen what's happening in California right now. We've seen what's happened over there in the previous. We've had evacuations here at different times over the years. We're in an extremely dry situation right now, and the possibility of evacuation is strong. So, whatever we can do to be prepared and be fire-wise, the fire department would like to clean as much flammable material away from our houses as we possibly can.
Thank you, Vice Chair Roberts. I don't have anything to add onto that. Director.
Thank you. Just a couple things. One, fire danger's already been mentioned. I don't think we can emphasize it enough. If you were watching the news last week, you may have heard a shout out to our Timber Mesa firefighters. We have several of them that are over in Los Angeles currently helping with those fires that they have there. And they were instrumental in helping save a few of the homes there. And they got a special shout out on the news. So that was great to see them and them representing. Would hate to have them do the same thing here for us. So simple things make a big difference. You know, if you can trim your trees up, the city does offer free trash removal on odd numbered months. So the next one would be first week, full week in March. Bundled branches would be picked up. Also bags of pine needles would be picked up. And then we have our annual Project Clean Sweep. But really a lot of it is just common sense and being active, you know, taking a look and taking action on things that you can do to help your home and your neighborhoods. Also would like to remind everybody, pets and pipes, right? We've had a recent spell of some pretty cold weather after we had some pretty warm weather. And pets and pipes don't like cold weather, so keep track of them. Pets, bring them inside if you need to, and make sure your pipes are insulated and that they're not freezing. With that, Chair, I'll go ahead and turn it back to you.
Thank you, Director. Seeing no other items on the agenda, I will adjourn us.